Hello. Let me get us organized here. How's everybody? Go. Oh, you've got my favorite pet. Oh, gosh.
You hear that?
Okay.
You're the
I wonder
teacher's
who dinner is.
She's the teacher's pet. He's the teacher's pet, right?
Yeah.
He's the teacher's pet. All right.
Oh,
How's
he loves
everybody
you for
doing?
some reason. He hears your voice and he's like, "Where is she? Where is she?"
Oh, that is fantastic. Well, here I am. Hello, big eyes.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I wonder who dinner is.
I'm not sure. Let me change my name. Let's see. Go. There we go. Okay. Hi, Bob.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, Susan.
Good morning. Where are you?
I'm good. Hey, Bill. And Pat and Lorenda. How are things going with the fabrics, Lorenda?
They're in the good hands of Carol Feltoon right now.
Good. Okay. Does she do all the cutting?
She does all the cutting that you mark. And then we do more marking and cutting on mitzvah morning.
Got it. Okay. Are there other people who mark from home besides me?
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you do almost half of what we need to make a complete set.
Okay.
And Janice Hershon does all the Velcro packs at home.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah. And Carol cuts at home. But then we have at mitzvah morning itself, we mark and cut the other pieces to put together.
Ah, okay.
And then we have someone in charge of putting it together.
So do you feel as though you have a complete team that's working to capacity? You're getting what you need?
I could use more people.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if you want to make an announcement at the end of this morning, go ahead.
Morning,
Hi.
Nancy.
Hi, Bernice. Hi, Pat. Hi, Nancy. Hey, Bill.
Good morning.
How are you?
How are you? I'm very well. How are you?
I'm really good.
Good. Nice to see everybody.
Good to see everybody. Yes. Did everybody have success accessing the materials?
Susan.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, good. Good. And including the video?
Oh, video?
That's okay.
Yeah,
That's
baby.
okay. I'm going to summarize it.
I would like to sit down, please.
Okay.
Hi, Marilyn.
Oh, there's Marilyn. Hi, Marilyn.
Yes, there is a video here. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hey, Phyllis. Hi, Vera.
Hello. Oh,
Marilyn, it looks like you're in a room with a bunk bed. Are you in a room with a bunk bed? Marilyn, you're on mute. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I am.
You're in a room with a bunk bed. Please tell me you don't take the top bunk.
No.
I said they're in the freezer.
No, this was for the grandchildren. And
Okay.
I realized
thought it
after
was
we
at
got
least
it,
on the counter.
No.
it's really high up towards the ceiling, and no woman my age should ever be making a bed up there. And anyway, yeah, but they haven't slept here for quite a while, but they were thrilled.
But I assume that when they do sleep there, they're very conscientious about making that top bed.
They try. They're very good.
Okay, I get it. Hi, Donna.
Hi,
Hey,
Diane.
Marilyn Goldfine. Hi, Ruth.
Morning.
How's everybody doing? We're almost ready to start.
I actually moved my screen a little bit because I heard Chance meowing in the background. He wants to make his announcement by coming into the room with his toy mouse in his mouth. So
as long as it's a toy, he's welcome.
Oh, it ain't, it's not real. No, it's a stuffed mouse that's tied to a string that's tied to a stick.
Oh,
and that's his favorite toy in the world. So
because
if I'm ignoring him or if he hears noise, I'll hear this. I'm like, what is this? And all of a sudden he comes marching in. So.
All right. Well, we will welcome him. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see everyone. We're only a little bit away from Passover. Can you believe it? Oh, gosh. Here we go. So welcome. This is the third of 4 sessions of our Zug this time. And I want to begin by having everyone join in the blessing, which is easier if people put themselves on mute. So if you can put yourself on mute, that would be great. And okay, so yeah, thanks, Phyllis. All right, so join me if you'd like. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So my colleague at school, Elizabeth, has set up this session to be automatically recording. So the fact that someone has learned to bypass me is a sign of genius and hope for success. So I want to do a quick review of the first couple of sessions and then give a relatively long intro to today's session. You know that this is about storytelling. And the first session, what Dina Weiss was focusing on is using the narrative text in such a deep and personal way that you would expand upon it with an imaginative and engaging set of details. And we found from that first session how impactful that can be when the storyteller puts him or herself into the story and reads it from that deep internal perspective. The second approach to storytelling was last week. And in that one, Dina was exploring what happens when you change the point of view of a storyteller. So if the teller of the story, let's say of our exodus from Egypt or our bondage in Egypt, if the storyteller is the Hebrews, then you have one response to that or one set of responses to that. And that has been the traditional way, certainly in the Haggadah, in which the story is told. But she backed it up and said, if you go into the end of Genesis, you can begin to understand from the Egyptian point of view what our presence in Egypt, and specifically what Joseph's effort to provide for the Egyptians resulted in, which was a complete loss of their money in exchange for food, then a loss of all of their cattle and sheep for food, then a loss of their land for food, and then a loss of their bodily freedom for food. And taking that perspective, it offers an enlarged capacity to be empathetic to what's happening in the story. Today's lesson focuses on what happens in the storytelling depending upon who is listening to the story. So we shift from the storyteller to the story recipient. And what Dina does in the video is provide 2 examples that are played out in the handout, one of which takes the 4 children, specifically the wicked child and the wise child, and takes a look at how you respond to their question or to their involvement or lack thereof in the Passover experience. One of which is rather direct, rather didactic. This is the deal. This is what would have happened. The other is not didactic, very experiential. This is the Rav's personal experience with having difficulties, with finding fault in himself, how he addresses the weaknesses that he might have, how he addresses the faults that he might have. And then by example, it becomes instructive. And her main point, we're going to play with this a little bit, but her main point is sometimes having a didactic purpose, while it can give the storyteller control over the message, it can hit very hard on the story recipient. Sometimes, though, just telling the story or telling the story from a very personal point of view, it might shortchange the control over getting your didactic message across, but it does open it up for the recipient to take what the recipient can take from it. So you lose some control over the message, but you gain a potential for engagement by the participant. And that's how she's going to weigh these two approaches. So I want to lead into this, though, in a way that actually Dina doesn't lead into it, but I think this is going to be helpful. Our focus in terms of text is the 4 children. And I want to make a number of comments about this. First of all, many of you may know, but in case you don't know, there is no canonical Passover Haggadah. The Passover Haggadah is an emerging, evolving, changing document. And while the earliest extant version is from the 3rd century, we have, I don't know how many of you were here when Rabbi Gelfand was here, but he had a collection of Haggadot. And honestly, the collection was amazing. There is one particular Haggadah which I want to draw to your attention, and it's a color-coded, the polychrome Haggadah. It's a color-coded Haggadah in which every letter, every word, every phrase, every passage is color-coded for when it entered the Haggadah. So some are in black because they're from the Torah, and some are in green or yellow or purple or blue. And so you get a sense of how the document, how the book was built up over time. And that gives allowance for us to keep building, to create our own, to take from this one a part that we like about this one, and take from that one a passage that we like about that one, and to compare and contrast them. And all of this process allows us to engage in the story in multiple ways. And that becomes a goal, a priority. So having said that, let me grab my notes here. I want to talk to you a little bit about the 4 children. And I think that both the child in us and the adult in us, the teacher in us, for some of us, the parent in us, the grandparent in us, I think that all the various parts of us have over time responded to the passage of the 4 children in strong ways. This tends to be a compelling element of the Haggadah. And one of the most compelling parts of it is the words surrounding the wicked son. Am I the wicked child? I've done bad things. Am I the wicked child? Would I not have been saved? If everyone was there and my grandfather would have been saved, would I not have been saved? So as children, maybe we respond to this in a certain way. It's complicated. Some current Haggadot soften the blow of the wicked child, who some of them don't use the word wicked. And there's precedent for changing the attribution of each of the children. For example, the simple child was originally called stupid. So the original documents of the Haggadah had the wise child, the stupid child, the wicked child, and the child who couldn't ask a question. And no one says stupid anymore. We haven't for a long time. It's almost a shock to hear that the original said referred to that as stupid. We say simple, a simple child. So we play around with this, but the wicked child presents a particularly gnarly problem. If a child is confronting you in a way that is offensive, derogatory, challenging, it can evoke from us a sense of, I want to take this person down. I want to give this person what they just gave me, right? And to a certain extent, that's where the first of our two passages is coming from. How do you rebuke a child who is confronting you? The second passage is much more, I guess I would say, much softer. I too have had real problems. I too have faced this difficulty. Here's how I have struggled with it. And then the hope is that by example, the wicked child may begin to take account of himself, herself, and alter their own behavior. Okay, so I want to stop there and give people a moment to just share any comments they have about what I've just said, comments they grew up with or feelings they grew up with when this passage was read at their Seder tables, how you maybe are dealing with this over the past few years or plan to deal with this for children at your Seder tables this year. Anyone have a comment so far? Lorenda.
It's a little bit off center, but I found it really interesting. We've been doing Passover on Zoom for the last few years. And that means that we can include in-laws that wouldn't normally come. And my daughter Catherine's brother-in-law, when he participated, the first time he just happened to get the simple son. And that's his part. He just really identifies with the person coming in as the simple son. And that's what he wants to do every time. I just thought that was really interesting.
It is. Good. Anyone else?
I should probably say you probably figured out that he is not Jewish.
Yeah. Anyone else want to share Yeah, Nancy?
I have a question.
Sure.
What's the definition of wicked?
Right. So some Haggadot do not say wicked. Some say evil. And this has bothered me too. So here's what I looked up. I'm not sure which is worse, wicked or evil. I think evil is worse. But anyway, the two adjectives, see if you like this, wicked and evil, have similar meanings. They both mean immoral or sinful. However, the adjective wicked also has some alternative meanings, which sometimes have a very different meaning from evil. The key difference between wicked and evil is that wicked can have connotations of mischief, playfulness, whereas evil is indicative of malevolence, immorality, and sin. Okay, I don't know whether your Haggadot tend to say evil child or wicked child. If wicked is mischievous, that's one thing. I mean, who doesn't want to have a child who's mischievous? Completely adorable and going to lead you down all kinds of dark alleys that you otherwise wouldn't go down. And usually it'll turn out just great. But wicked can also mean, as evil does, malevolent. And that's really harsh, especially since we accept that children are evolving. Their story is not yet fully written, whose is. But they really are just laying the foundation for their story. And for many students, they try on different hats at different times to see what it's like to be willful and sullen and obstreperous and wicked, right? So it doesn't mean that they are. Maybe they're just role-playing for themselves. Does that help, Nancy?
Yeah, but going back to the context, am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Okay. Is it in the Jewish context? First of all, the Hebrew word, and I mean, just like when we had "you shall be killed if you do this," that really never happened. Is it the same thought line of thinking that wicked is hyperbole, or it means more like obstinate? That is, a willful obstinance is wicked, that you're not accepting the words as told to you by your parent.
Okay, hold on one sec. I'm actually looking the word up. I have a second computer open to the Brown driver bricks. Well, I think that we're actually using wicked as an extension of the potential of this word. Doesn't seem to be so bad. Rasha, make firm, can be a creditor, can mean to possess. Let's see, hang on a second. No. I'm not sure how this became so negative. You'd have to talk to someone who has more biblical knowledge than I do, more biblical Hebrew knowledge than I do. Anyone else? Yeah, Wendy, and then Donna.
If I'm remembering correctly, isn't the wickedness of the wicked child related to his saying something like, "Why is this so important to you?" and thereby separating himself from the Jewish people? And that, as we know from Pirkei Avot, it's a terrible thing to separate yourself from the community. So that doesn't seem like terribly wicked, for him to for him to question that, but is.
So yes, and I'm going to add to that, Wendy. There are two causes which resulted in the rabbis initially saying that this child is wicked. One is that in the verse that's quoted, and this is Exodus 12:26. So in 12:26, the Hebrew says, "Vayaki yomru alechem." When your sons, when your children say to you. It doesn't say when your children ask you. It says when they say to you. What does this mean to you? So they flag to you, as in to you and not to me, right? And also the children are saying, they are not asking. And that for the rabbis meant they are taking a position. They are not open to an explanation. They are telling you, I don't belong here with you. Now, what's interesting is that in a number of translations of that verse, the scholars, and I'm talking here about Rabbi Plaut, Rabbi Alter, their translation doesn't say when your children say to you. Their translation says when your children ask of you. So they've softened that rabbinic argument by translating it incorrectly, to be honest. Sha'al is to ask, lish'ol is to ask, vayomer is to say, and this is vayomer. But for these two reasons, saying and not asking, to you and not to us, those two reasons open the door for the rabbis to say, this child is wicked. And your answer to them depends on how you perceive them. Do you want to smack them? In which case you're going to say, because of what the Lord did for me. The implication being, and not for you. Because had you been there, you would not have been saved. very harsh. Or, yes, it's really, I struggle with this too. Sometimes it's hard for me to feel as though I'm part of the community. But here's why I've struggled with it, and here's where I've come to it. And my example may be helpful to you so that the next time you ask that question or make that statement, you will say, what does this mean to us? Right? Very different approaches. Donna, you had your hand up.
No, I was just going to say that I have this very visceral memory growing up of people, of it being asked in the Seder, which child do you identify with? And my answer was always the wicked one. And because I saw the wicked one as the questioner, the pushing backer, the wanting to know more, the not necessarily following the straight and narrow path. And I wanted to be that much more than the simple or the is afraid to ask questions people. So I never saw it as bad wicked.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're taking a more mischievous, kids who have a lot of Beetlejuice, and they're just going to, hit the world hard and push and find their place and carve out their place. And, that's who they're going to be. By a show of hands, and if you don't show your hand, it's fine. You can still feel this way. Anybody else tend to identify with the wicked child? Ah, interesting. Okay. How many of you have seen in some of the Haggadot, there's a page of the 4 children, and it's a series of paper cuts. And it's blue and orange and red and maybe yellow. And each child is in silhouette, and each child on this photographed page has different combinations of all 4 colors, right? So the implication being, how are we not all of these children? And depending upon the moment and the situation and the context, I've been in situations where honestly, I don't even know how to ask. I don't even know how to enter. And there's other situations where I think that is for you and that is not for me. I'm sorry. I can't join the community in that way. So I feel as though we've all played our roles in various situations. And again, this is an exercise in empathy, both for others, for our children, our students, but also for ourselves, that our story is still being written, that we still play combinations of these roles, and none of us is defined by a single one of these roles. And certainly, I think in terms of modern understanding of human development, while each of us is born with a personality and certain preferences and certain proclivities, and they begin to declare themselves in various ways over time, none of us is immalleable. None of us is fully baked by the time we are a day old. And so we mature and we take on and we try out. Okay, so if you're ready, let's take a look at the text itself, okay? And I'm going to share. Let's take that down and let's put this up. Okay. Now, take yourself off mute if you cannot see this, and let me know if you cannot see this text. It's okay? All right. So here we have, the source text is Kli Yakar, which was written by Rabbi Shlomo Ephraim Lunchitz. And he is going to take, let's see, let me just read this. In this passage, the rabbi is not explaining what the verse itself means, but as most commentators would do, but rather he's talking about its use in the Seder ritual, the Kli Yakar draws our attention to a somewhat odd phenomenon in the section of the Haggadah about the four sons, the wise, the wicked, the simple, and the one who does not know how to ask. Two of these children receive the same verse in response to their question. Here we go. And you shall tell your son on that day, because of this, which God did for me when I left Egypt. All right, that's going to be our response. What does the evil son say? Here it's evil, not wicked. What does the evil son say? What is this service to you? And notice the translation here is, what does the evil son say? Not what does the evil son ask? So this is an accurate translation of the Hebrew. Rasha, Mahu Omer. What does he say? What is this service to you? To you, but not to himself. And since he excluded himself, he has rejected the fundamental principle of the religion. So you should set his teeth on edge and say to him, because of this which God did for me when I left Egypt, for me, but not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. And for one who does not know to ask, you should initiate as it says, and you shall tell your son on that day, saying, because of this, which God did for me when I left Egypt. Same verse, same response to the wicked child and the one who can't ask. Okay. Though the verse is quoted twice, the emphasis for each son is different. When the verse is deployed in response to the wicked son, the parent is supposed to imply, God redeemed me, but not you. Whereas the negative valence is completely absent when the verse is quoted again for the benefit of the child who doesn't know how to ask. There, it simply says that you should instruct him by reciting the verse, which contextualizes the Passover service and connects it to the Exodus from Egypt. In other words, give them context so that they can ask. And if you've ever been in a situation where honestly you just don't know what to ask, you don't even know what to say, if someone can give you some context, that opens doors for you. Oh, now I can begin to ask them questions. So context is crucial for the child who doesn't know how to ask. The Kli Yakar explains how the same verse can be deployed very differently and how it can teach very different lessons to people with differing attitudes. And I apologize, I'm going to read this whole thing just so that we have it out on the table. The Torah is talking about a case where your son is sitting in front of you with his hand on his mouth and he isn't asking anything. And it is not clear to you whether he is quiet because he doesn't know how to ask or because he is bad and wicked. And in order to escape from this confusion, you should go out and say to him, because of this which God did for me when I left Egypt. And then you will have fulfilled your responsibility either way, regardless. If he is wicked in his heart, then you will have set his teeth on edge when you said, which God did for me. Because since he does not participate in the service, which is being referred to as this, then he will understand that for me means and not for you. And if he is not wicked, but rather doesn't know how to ask, then you should say this verse to him as well. But it will be understood that for me means and not for you, because, does not know how to ask, because the one who does not know how to ask, if he were there, he certainly would also engage in the service. Big leap. And for this reason, the verse deliberately chose the language of, you shall tell your child, the higadta, like Haggadah, higadta. And it did not say, you should say, or you should speak, because the language of telling works both ways. It can mean words as tough as sinews, gidden. That's the sinew that you use it's the animal sinew that you use to tie the parchment together on a Torah scroll, for example, and agadah, which means to draw out the heart of a person like water. So on the one hand, you can tie that person, it's a tight bond, or you can find a way to draw out that person from their heart. And the same verse can work either way. Okay, let me stop there. Thoughts on that? And I can tell that some people are not muted. So if you aren't muted, if you could do that, that would be great. Let's see. Okay, thoughts on the Kli Yakar? Questions, confusions? Vera.
I'm having a hard time understanding the child that does not know, is it how to ask or what to ask? Because it sounds more like the child doesn't know what to ask versus how to ask. I'm guessing that the child knows how to ask stuff, or like, can I have a drink of water? But like when it comes to understanding the Passover story, he might have a frog in his throat and be just be lost in its awe.
Well, Vera, I'm delighted by this question. This is really cool. I have a response, but does someone else have a response that they'd like to share first? Is it the child who doesn't know how to ask, or the child who doesn't know what to ask? And what might be the difference? Anyone want to take that one on? Okay, so Vera, yeah, Bill.
Well, it seems like if you don't know how to ask, it's almost like an innocence that you don't have the vocabulary yet. You may be too young, or you just don't have the ability. But if you don't know what to ask, you have that vocabulary, but you don't know how to put it into words, like what I'm trying to say now.
Yeah. Vera, is that sort of the distinction that you're
it's
lifting
kind of
up?
subtle. Yeah, it's kind of subtle.
And not really, because it would kind of imply that child would be simple. If the child knows, how to ask, then the child would ask. But if it doesn't know what to ask, that would imply, everything's up here. It's what I call, brain to mouth dispersion. That is, the cogs are a little tied up.
So that's interesting. So let me add a third option.
Okay.
A child who intellectually can ask. Maybe they ask questions in school, and maybe they ask questions of their parents, and they ask questions. So it's not that they are incapable of asking, and yet they are silent. And they look simple. And what is their silence? Why is their hand covering their mouth? Maybe their hand is covering their mouth because in that particular situation, they don't know how to ask. And depending upon the seders that you've grown up with, or the school situations that you've experienced, or any situation that you've experienced where you are in over your head, and the people around you seem to know everything, and you seem to know nothing. And are you really going to reveal that you know nothing? You are frozen. You cannot ask. You dare not ask. For the child who dare not ask, now I think I'm offering up a fifth child. For the child who dare not ask, because the context is frightening and imposing and risky. Interesting. Any other comments on this passage in Khalil Nakar? Yeah, Nancy.
Well, the translation that we're given, and for the one who does not know to ask, to me means the child is sitting there and does not know that this is the time or the place for questions, so does not react to the environment, sees things in very simple terms, and so it's up to the leader to initiate the questions or the answer. So to me, it's not, given the translation, does not know to ask, doesn't recognize that this is a time to and a place to be asking questions to understand further. And that doesn't imply, to me, simpleness and intellectual capacity. It means that it doesn't resonate with this particular child. So it's up to the leader,
Yes,
in the dyad, to start the conversation.
I'm reminded of a story. Nancy, I really appreciate this. I'm reminded of a story that takes me back more than 40 years because we didn't have kids then. So let's say 45 years ago. I was in a study group with a rabbi and I was terrified. It wasn't my study group. I was a visitor, and it was barely a minyan, and we would go around the table and just read from the Psalms in English. A couplet here, a couplet there, a couplet there, and I would mark out, okay, I'm number 7, so what do I have to read? And I would practice the English, right? So that when it came to me, I would be okay. And at one point, the rabbi stopped and said, hold on a second. Do you believe what you're saying? The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimonies of the Lord are true. They are righteous altogether. We just said that, right? Someone just said, do you believe that? And I thought, wait a second. Are we allowed to ask if we believe this? I didn't know that we could ask. I didn't know that we could have an opinion about it. It changed the entire trajectory of my entering Judaism. And it's what Nancy has just said. It fell upon the leader to make it possible for those participants around the table to know this is a time when you can ask. Now, I will say, in terms of the quotation, for the one who does not know to ask, it does not say how. The Hebrew is v'sheino yodea lish'ol, for the one who does not know to ask. So if we insert how or that or now or any of those terms, we are shifting, just offering a slightly altered perspective on the question, right? Or on that child. Yeah, Bernice.
It kind of reminds me a lot of times when I have questions, when you're speaking or when somebody else is speaking, I may have questions, but I feel like I'm not smart enough to ask those questions. And maybe it will reflect on my dumbness or whatever it is. And afterwards, I will think to myself, well, I still didn't get the answer to that because I never asked. So maybe I'm the simple one and I don't know how to ask. And I have to learn that procedure.
Well, how many of us have been in a situation where we just are not going to take the risk of asking that question because that might just be the question that tips everybody off to the fact that we don't know anything. We have no business being at this table, being in this room, or taking this course. And am I really going to shine a light on my inadequacies in front of this, esteemed audience? Not on your life. And truthfully, Bernice, in my family growing up, the Seder that we had with one side of the family, rather very Orthodox family, nobody asked anything. It went like, I had no idea what happened. And eventually we would get permission for all the kids to leave the Seder table and go to the back room and play. And that was fine. The other Seder was highly intellectual. We're talking about an appellate judge, a law professor. Okay, so, and I'm just a little squib. You think I'm going to ask a question? I'm not going to ask a question. This is a family that values knowledge above everything else. I'm not going to ask a question. Did I have questions? Yeah. Questions like, what does this mean to you? What are we doing here? And I would panic at the thought that I would be the one that Grandpa would say, so Diane, why do we have the egg at the Seder table? Because from year to year, I swear I couldn't remember. And he would always ask me that question. And I would be frozen, solid, like in the ice. And then they would go to one of my sisters who would give a wonderful answer. Bernice, every single one of us is completely, hopelessly, stupidly ignorant in certain situations, and brilliant, insightful, and sensitive in other situations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's take this a little further. So I want to take a look at some of the questions that Dina is asking here and see if they spark additional conversation. Number one, the Kliyakar argues that the verse's meaning changes based on the perception of who is hearing it. Notice here, it's based on the storyteller's perception of who is hearing it, not on who is hearing it, but on the leader's perception of who is hearing it. If the child is wicked, meaning if the leader feels the child is wicked and excludes themselves, then the verse will sound exclusive to them. If the child is simply being quiet, but not intending to be defiant, then they will hear the verse neutrally and will be educated, but not feel chastised. Do you think this strategy can work? Do you think the wicked child will hear the verse correctly, meaning in the way it is intended? Do you think it's a risk and the quiet child might get the wrong message? And I will add to that, do you think it's a risk and the wicked child might get the right message? And what is the risk there? Okay. Who wants to jump on that? Yeah, Vera. Yeah. And then Judy.
I think you do take that risk. If you do take that risk, have a good backup answer for them to, in case they have a response to you taking that risk and presenting that statement.
Yes. Yes. Good. Good. Yeah, Judy. No? I'm going to go back to a comment that was made earlier, and I'm not positive who made it. And then, Lorenda, I'll give you a chance. This is a problem of context. If a person asks a question or fails to ask a question, but you think they might want to ask a question, but not know how to ask the question, or if they ask a question and it seems to you defiant, what's missing here in your understanding what's going on is the context from which they're asking or failing to ask or deciding not to ask that question. If you make a judgment about what someone's intention is based upon the words that come out of their mouth or the tone of voice that they use when they say them, but you don't understand where that's coming from, the likelihood that you will misunderstand it is very great. So that's where the leader needs to be extremely cautious. If you set it up so that people feel as though they can ask a question, and it's okay to ask a question, and other people are asking questions, and their responses are received with thoughtfulness and compassion and interest, then you have a better idea of where a child might be coming from if they don't ask or if they ask defiantly. But it's also possible for the leader to say, help me understand what you're asking. Help me understand why the table right now is so quiet, right? And then you can begin to narrow down your understanding and home in your understanding of what really is happening. Without that, I think it's very risky. Lorinda.
Donna, if you, I don't want to embarrass you in front of everyone, but I would really like to know what the response of the adults was when you answered that you wanted to be the wicked child every year, that your preference was the wicked child's answer every year.
I think that they said, oh yeah, okay, let's move on. I don't think I think they.
Oh, you again. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh gosh, Judy.
In our family, everybody wants to be wicked. Everyone would compete to be the wicked child, and my dad would lead the cause, because he was just always needing to challenge, and grew up in a very different Jewish world where asking questions was not, was the antithesis of what Pesach is really about. So there's something that resonates about the wicked child who's like, it's what you said, Diane. What's behind the anger? What's behind the, what's behind that rhetoric? What's the context? Because there's energy in that anger, and there, and there's some conflict in that you can really start to, maybe, play with a little bit. So I know we in our family, we better if it were celebrate the wicked child.
Well, I love the use of the term play with it, of the phrase, you can play with it. We have different ways of reading the verse, and the Haggadah is clear about them. Because of what the Lord did for me, with emphasis on me and not you. But there are a lot of different ways to read the question as well, right? So you could read the question defiantly. What does this mean to you? Or why should I bother with this? This is stupid, right? Or you could say, what does this mean to you? Right? What does this mean to you, Grandpa? What does this mean to you, my sister, Linda? I want to understand. Lorinda just did that. What does it mean? What happens when you did that? So, just as there are multiple ways of reading a verse on any situation, there are multiple ways of reading both what the child says and what the response offers. Let's take a look at a different question that she raises. What are the advantages to using the same verse for two different types of children? How is it helpful to the parent, the educator? How is it helpful to the children or learners? I'm going to keep going. Have you ever tried to use this type of strategy, hoping that a person will get the message subtly without having to be singled out? And did it work? And finally, why do you think using the type of strategy outlined by the Klil Yakar, might be employed at the Seder specifically? Do any of these questions catch your interest, or do they spark a question that's different than them that catches your interest? Yeah, Phyllis. Let's see.
Sorry, couldn't have you.
No.
Yeah, I think it's no different than as a teacher, we realize that some children learn audibly, some visually, and that we have to use, say the same thing more than one way. And I think this is what it's saying to me, that we don't all get it the same way. So yes, we do have to, perhaps the leader has to say it more than one way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's different portals of entry and different pathways for expression and grasping. Yes, for sure. You know, way back when I was full-time teaching middle school, and occasionally there'd be a child who would just be out of their skin. They couldn't sit still. They couldn't stop talking. They just couldn't. And I wanted to draw attention to them to help them stop, but I didn't want to draw attention to them in a way that would encourage them to keep going. So I would say quietly, everyone could hear me, but quietly, do you need a little extra attention today? And usually they would go, oh, okay, right? And then there were times when a child would just not be able to stay awake. How boring am I? Boring. Okay, I get it. So I would take my tallis bag, which was this like velvety, soft tallis bag, and I would bring it over to their desk and say, put your cappy down. It's okay. Rest. And the whole class would know that it was okay. You don't have to fight what you're feeling right now. So I could have chastised both of them. But instead, I offer them a face-saving way to be as they are and still be part of the group. Glue Your Car is not doing that. He's definitely on the side of, I have a message I want to give, and I'm going to give that message, and that message is going to come through loud and clear. Do you see how that's working as far as what Dean is presenting here? Okay. So with the time we have left, I want to shift us to the second part. And I'm not positive we'll get through all of this, but let me read her introduction. This is Me'or Vashemesh. So Rabbi Kalonymus Kalaman Epstein, among the first Hasidic teachers, one of the key elements of his approach to leading and teaching was that people learn from the examples set by one another. People are inspired by their peers, not just by great leaders and thinkers. And sometimes learning from a peer is more effective since a peer provides an achievable model. And I'm going to emphasize the word achievable. In this passage, Rabbi Epstein is speaking about the challenge of delivering rebuke and negative feedback. How do we do that? He acknowledges that it is the responsibility of leaders to help people improve their behavior. But he rejects the idea that the proper way to encourage people to improve is to explicitly point out their failings. For me, and not for you. For had you been there, you would not have been saved. First, he says, in order to give pointed feedback, we need to truly know and understand the other person. Tell me what you mean by that. Can you help me understand what you're asking right now? And that is very hard to do, especially when the leader is responsible for teaching a large group of people. And second, it's uncomfortable to tell someone that they are in the wrong, since we don't want to shame or hurt them. That, I think, is crucially important for his approach in terms of our current conversation. We're going to go off into a direction that I'm curious what your response is. Here's the nugget. In this selection, we'll see that there is yet a third problem. Even once you have found the leader who understands people well enough to rebuke them, and even once you've found the people who are eager to hear feedback and won't take it the wrong way, that tzaddik, the leader, might be too humble, too aware of his own flaws, to feel that he is in a position to point out the flaws of other people. Rabbi Epstein suggests, however, that this humility on the part of the tzaddik could be used to his advantage and enable him to deliver rebuke indirectly. When the tzaddik engages with his own flaws, he serves as a model for other people to also understand their own shortcomings. Through listening to the tzaddik address what is going on in his religious life, other people will be inspired to engage in a similar way with their own. And here's the passage. The tzaddik is low of value in his own eyes, and he doesn't believe in himself at all. And his heart is vacant inside him, and only words that emerge from the heart enter the heart. So only what I sincerely feel in the deepest of my being and share with you, only that has the capacity to enter deeply into you. That's the maxim. Therefore, he thinks to himself, what will it help if I say moving words to them? Isn't it the case that my words do not emerge from my heart? And won't enter the heart of the listener? If I'm just mouthing the words, but I don't genuinely feel the meaning of them, they will not impact the listener. So it is only through the stories and the everyday talk of the tzaddik that a person can do teshuvah, to return to, repent. And the idea is that the tzaddik needs to be constantly searching his own actions as well as his character traits, that they be clean and clear and exclusively for God. And sometimes an uncertainty will occur in his mind and concerning one character trait. For example, an uncertainty as thin as hair in the traits of faith and belief. And it appears to him that he is without faith or without belief. So he will take even the smallest sense of inadequacy and explode it to become perhaps an utter lack of faith or belief. And his mind will be focused on this trait and trying to fix it. At this time, his speech and his stories will be his takeaways from the matter he is focusing on in his own life. And he will tell some story about the matter of faith or belief. And everyone who hears this story from his mouth will be reminded themselves that they have flaws in the trait of faith or belief. And they will be awakened on their own to do teshuvah for this in order to fix that which he damaged. And then the words of the tzaddik will truly enter his heart. For the intention of the tzaddik is towards heaven, to fix the uncertainty in his own mind that emerged in this matter. And eventually an uncertainty will emerge in the tzaddik regarding love or fear. And the one who hears from him some story regarding love or fear will be reminded themselves that they are flawed in this matter and will see to fix it according to the story that they heard from the tzaddik. Okay. So you see how different an approach this is than what is offered in the Klil Yakar. Comments on how this sort of hits you at this point? Questions or thoughts?
This just sounds it's such a brilliant strategy of stories and storytelling being just this whole other level of human communication. It's hard to find the right story, but although the Haggadah certainly does offer us one, but to actually personalize it in some, true, meaningful way, it takes a lot of thought, but it's a brilliant strategy.
It's a brilliant strategy. I actually tend towards this strategy, and I've used it already in our discussion today. I'm curious whether anybody would say, oh, you know what? Yeah, when Diane did X or Y, I guess that's what Diane was doing. Did anybody pick up on that? Okay, bye, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, I think when you were explaining to me like the different definitions of a child being, of not knowing to ask, whether you put an adjective in there or not, I think that's an example of what the last rabbi you were talking about was explaining in terms of being able to, what's the word I'm looking for? Compare and contrast. If that made any sense whatsoever, let me know. If not, I'll try and explain it in a different way. But that's the way I was able to tell how you were able to instruct by showing that it's not just one answer that fits all, like it shows in that one passage, but you're able to retranslate it in a different dialect so that at least I was able to understand it.
Thank you. I'm glad. I'm really glad. Yeah. Bernice.
I always like the way when we ask questions, when anybody asks a question, you will never, what's the word, rebuke us. You will always say either, oh yeah, yes, that's a good answer, or it will never, I don't ever think I've heard from you saying, no, that's not right. You let us all have our opinions.
Thank you. This is really important. It's a priority of mine because causing shame is horrifying to me. I've experienced it where I have caused shame, and it is horrifying. Can't sleep. I have to fix it if I can. But the other thing is that look, I'm not a rabbi. I'm largely self-taught with the help of some wonderful teachers in various ways, patchwork put together over many years. What do I know? What do I know? I don't know. I know what I know. I share what I share. If I find a moment in which my inadequacy or my experience could help someone feel included and help someone feel connected, I'll share it. And yes, I do enjoy sharing my story. Who doesn't like sharing their story? But it's always for the purpose, I hope. I intend it for the purpose of making it that much more accessible to be part of a conversation that makes a difference to each of us. And if it fails to do that, then I probably shouldn't have shared it. It's a waste of our time. But if it helps anybody feel as though, I get it. You know what? That reminds me of things that happened when I was blah, blah, blah. Then now we have a study group, right? Okay. So our time is very limited. In fact, I'm a few minutes over time. So I'm going to thank you all very, very much. And Elizabeth will have access to the recording. So if you know of anyone who wanted to come and didn't have a chance to come, they can just contact Elizabeth or contact me, and I'll send their name forward and they'll get a link to the recording. I want to thank everybody. Enjoy. I will see you next Wednesday, and we'll have our final session for this Zug. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Diane.
Thank you.